Alrighty, everybody. Welcome back to another Rhino tutorial. Today we are quickly going to go over setting up some clipping planes for making plans and sections. It's pretty straightforward. We've done something similar to this before in the past, so shouldn't all be new, but trying to set you guys up for success. So let's get into it. You can see here I've got my buildings. We've got four sort of volumes with some doors and some windows at some varying heights. Super, super simple. Kind of a Moriyama house organization here. Yeah, and you can see in my layers, I've got two sort of groups, and then I've got my clipping plane layer, my construction line layer, which is a no print, and then this default. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Okay, so if I drop down my 3D, you can see I've got my buildings. If we do select objects, you'll see it selects all those, and then I also have my ground plane. I'm going to close that. We're going to open up the 2D, and let me move this guy down. And I've gone ahead and made three layers, a cut, a medium, and a light layer. There's also a white layer for some white lines. We're not going to be using that today, but I like to keep it in there just in case I ever have to use it. And yeah, so these are going to be our three line weights that we're going to get once we start cutting up our object. And let's get right into it. So first thing we're going to do, I'm going to select the clipping plane layer and really straightforward. I'm going to type clipping plane, press spacebar, and it's going to ask me to create a rectangle for it. And so I'm going to go ahead, create a rectangle right there, and you'll see that everything gets clipped off, and I'm left with this sort of flat plane. And you can see that highlighted in red here is where the clipping plane intersects with objects. And so if I use my Gumball tool and I start to drag it up, you can start to see how the clipping plane is beginning to operate. It's the name is pretty on the nose. It clips away anything it intersects with, and it has a direction to it. So for a little science experiment here, if I do flip, you'll see now that the clipping plane is clipping everything that's below it. If I do flip again, we get right back to where we were. Sometimes you might encounter an issue where you create a clipping plane and it is not clipping the way you want. Don't be scared, just hit flip and it should all be good. Now, quickly, another sort of housekeeping with clipping planes is ways that we can hide or disable clipping planes. So I have it on its own layer right now, so that if I were to go to another layer and I turn it off, it just hides the clipping plane, so that way I can't touch it or mess it up, right? This can lead to some confusion when you're trying to turn off the clipping plane, because if I turn the layer on and off and the clipping plane doesn't turn off, what do? Super simple. You're gonna make sure your clipping plane layer is on. You're gonna select your clipping plane, and you are just gonna do disable clipping plane. And now the clipping plane is null and void, and I can turn it off. I can keep modeling if I need to, if I'm just trying to see, get a sense of what the section or plan may look like. I want to disable and enable it. If I'm dealing with multiple clipping planes, which we will be soon, I'm going to want to enable it and disable it. Okay, so for now, we're going to turn it back on. One more place in which clipping plane can get disabled or enabled. I'm going to go ahead and type the command enable clipping plane to turn it back on. But right here in our display panel, if you don't have a display panel, you can go up to the panels here, scroll down, and hit display, and it'll pop up. Basically, this gives us options for the display mode that we're using. So I'm in shaded right now, and you can see all of these fun little boxes that may be turned on or off. For example, I turn off ISO curves. That's just a preference. It's good to have it on, but if I'm just moving around and I want to see this model in a clean way, I'll turn it off. But having the display panel lets me toggle these things on and off. Same with shadows. I don't think I have, oh, yes I do. Start to see the shadows, but I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off for now. But if we keep scrolling down, we'll see clipping planes here. And again, I can turn it on and off again. This doesn't disable or enable the clipping plane, it just hides the clipping plane. So that's something super key. So you might be in an instance where your object is clipped, you do show, nothing shows. You turn your clipping plane layer on and off, nothing shows. It might be down here in display. So for this video, I recommend just keeping them on and having it on a separate layer here so we don't ever really have to deal with the settings. Okay, cool. So let's keep this on. I'm going to move this clipping plane back down to the corner of the ground surface, and we're going to start with a plan cut. So plans are typically anywhere from 3 to 4 feet, depending on the levels of information we're trying to show. Those can be adjusted and to an extent, but usually for our purposes, we'll keep it around 3 to 4 feet. So I'm going to go ahead. There's a couple different ways we can do this. I can use my Gumball tool, and I can go type 3 feet, see where I'm at. Or if I go back, I can do move. I can hit V for vertical, and then I can specify the distance here, do 3 feet. Okay, so right now, I'm actually pretty happy with this because I can see that it's cutting through, or the place that it's cut, I still have some depth here to show the windows. It's cutting through all the openings, nothing's clipped. So I'm pretty happy with this plan cut. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off for now. I'm gonna go into my top view down here. Oh, and it's not top view. It's okay, we'll do set view, top. Turn the clipping plane back on. You'll notice that it's not always on for all viewports, and you can see that here. So I can either just check the box, or I can select the clipping plane to enable clipping plane. Either works. Okay, I'm gonna turn that off again. And we're left here with this plan, right? And I have two very simple geometries. I just have buildings and I have ground. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select it all. I'm going to type the command make 2D, and we get this drop down. So let's see, I'm going to call this make 2D underscore plan 01. Right on. Okay, a couple of things here. We do not want hidden lines because hidden lines will be dotted lines or in the background. We're dealing with orthographic drawings and pretty regular at that. So that information is not necessary. We want to make sure we have on clipping plane intersections. Basically, this will put the clipping plane intersection on a separate layer, which will be helpful in a second. We want to do register with previous, group output, and maintain source layers. We want to have projection be our current view. Our view is in the top, so this all looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Computer's going to do a big think. You're going to see a bunch of stuff pop up here. And, there it is. It's hiding all the way over here. So if you do make 2D and you click out of it, like I just did here, and you're like, oh no, where's my stuff? Super easy. We're going to right click. We're going to do select sublayer objects. We're going to do the command ZS, which is zoom selected. That'll bring us to our object. I'm now going to do type the command ZE, which is zoom extents. That'll show us where everything is in our model. And I'm just going to use the Gumball tool here to move us closer to our model. Once again, I'm going to do ZE, and now I can use the move command and place it where I want to place it. So for now, we're going to go right here. Awesome. Okay, super, super easy, right? Next thing we're going to do in this drop down, so I don't like to keep my objects and lines in these layers, I think that they can get very convoluted and very confusing very quickly. This is a pretty simple Make 2D, so it'll be pretty quick to transfer these lines into my layers that I've made in my 2D layer. But if you're dealing with a bigger model, and I'll show you an example at the end, it's a bit more confusing, it's a bit more time intensive, but it is super, super, super important for layer organization and having everything in the right place. So the first thing that I like to start with is the clipping plane intersection. So I'll go ahead and I will right click clipping plane intersection. I'm going to do select sublayer objects. I'm going to then scroll up to my 2D layer, right click on cut, and I'm going to do change object layer. Very simple. Now you can see it's in my cut layer. Everything that is cut is red, and we like that. I'm now going to go back down. I can go ahead and delete my clipping plane intersection layers, and Rhino will not let you delete a layer that has objects on it without you double checking. So for example, if I wanted to delete this curves layer, big pop-up's going to come up. It's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to do this. I don't want to do that. So that's a good way to check to make sure that all of your curves are over. It won't let you delete layers unless there's no curves on the layer. So now what I'm going to do is we have two objects happening here. So for this purpose, it's pretty straightforward. So like the site here, I'm going to select that. I'm going to put that on the light layer. Change object there. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take this buildings layer and choose select objects. And you can see it's selecting all of the window sills. So the window sills are slightly higher than the ground. So we want to have them be a slightly heavier line weight than things that are all the way at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead, right click medium, I'm going to do change object layer. And it's all about creating hierarchies of information. I'm sure you guys are starting to know this now, but yeah, super, super important. It's all hierarchies. All right, and I'm gonna do one last thing. I'm gonna take my light and I'm gonna draw lines at the entrances here. Just to show that there's a separation between the site area and the interior area. So now I can go ahead and delete my Make 2D. All right, allegedly. There we go. And it let me delete it because there's no lines. So making a plan, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It's key to keep it at 3 to 4 feet, or at least for the cut line. So now I'm gonna go back to perspective, change this to shaded view, like that. Okay, cool. I'm gonna turn on my clipping plane layer and we have my plan cut here. Now, in trying to pick a section cut for your spaces, you want to think about what the section is going to start doing for you. So in these volumes, what I'm looking at here, I can't tell in the plan that there's a skylight here or a skylight there. And we're going to get into ways to show that in plan. But I wanted to make it super apparent, and I want to show off this height difference between the two buildings. So for my section, I want to take a section that's going to kind of cut straight through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. No, yeah, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to copy it in place like that. You can also just do Control C, Control V. I am going to select this gumball, and I'm going to turn this 90 to get the clipping plane to look like that. I think a little bit more efficient and better practice way would be to actually just create a new clipping plane. You're going to do, you'll see here you have all these options. We're going to do 3 point, and I'm basically going to go 1, 2, 3. So this clipping plane is now planar with the objects that I want to cut through. In this case, the clipping plane is flipped the direction I want it to, so I can slide it through. If I know I want to take my cut directly at the center of this opening, I can do M. I'm going to hold Shift when I'm moving, and as I'm holding Shift, I'm going to tap the Tab key. And so what that does is you can let go of Shift now, and it'll move an object on the plane that you set. And so that's going to be helpful as I snap to my midpoint here, click it, and cool. I'm happy with that. It's worth noting too, we have to make sure that our plan clipping plane is disabled, excuse me, because if it is enabled, start to get something like this, which for our purposes right now, we don't need. But you can start to really play with clipping planes to create chunks and little axons of your buildings down the line. But I'm just going to do Control Z to go back. So originally I said I wanted to do it at the midpoint here, but we're getting a weird little condition, right? That's happening here. It's like a sliver of this object. So I'm going to go ahead, select my clipping plane. I'm just going to move it forward a little bit to get that cut. So now we start to get a sense of what this will look like. Okay, and so now I'm going to want to open, let's enable clipping plane here. And I want to look at my left view, set view left. And I'm going to turn my display mode to shaded. Cool. And now we are dealing, turn on ISO curves. I'm actually going to turn on shadows here just to see what kind of depth we have. Okay. And so what we're going to be looking at is we're going to see this building behind. We're going to see parts of this building behind. And we're going to have some interior conditions happening here, right? So if I go back to my left view, actually, scratch that. We're going to go to perspective, and we are going to select the objects that we want to make 2D, just like that. I'm going to go back to left, and I'm going to type make 2D once again. And this one I'm going to call make 2D section 01. Again, same settings as we had. I'm going to press OK. It's going to give it a think. I'm going to go back to top view. And in this case, the objects are right on top of the geometries. Once again, if you click away, don't be afraid. Simply right click, select sublayer objects, and we can scoot this over. Cool. Okay, and it's pretty straightforward from here. We're going to follow the same rules that we followed for the plan. It might help some of you to think about how a plan and a section are kind of the same drawing typology. We're cutting through parts of our building. However, we're looking at it from different sides and different angles. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to select sublayer objects for my clipping plane, and I'm going to put it on my cut layer. Just like so. And then here, this is where it gets a little bit more selective and a little bit more intuitive. So I know that these, and you'll see it's a group output. So I'm going to go ahead and do Control-Shift-G to ungroup, and I can select these lines freely. And I'm going to do the same here, Control-Shift-G. This object in the back, it's a single line, but this is where the grouping becomes helpful. If you have large pieces of context that you want to put on a separate layer, very simple. It's already grouped, so you can just select it. So we'll start from the back. I'll go ahead and select this. This is super tertiary information. It's just context. So I'm going to put it on my light line layer, excuse me. And then these objects here, I'm going to change the door. First, I'm going to join those curves, and then I'm going to change it to the medium layer since it's a bit closer. And the same thing with our cut lines here. You can see that these Curves aren't joined, so you're going to want to make sure you go ahead, join these curves, but then these will be placed onto the medium layer too. Like most of the drawings that you all have been making, it's not necessarily a one and done. You're going to want to print these out and double check that the line weights are working for you. If they're not, then you go back and you edit it, and etc. etc. Okay. Quickly too, I think it's worth talking about annotating these so that we know where we are cutting from. So, for example, on this section cut here, we are cutting across this clipping plane. So an easy thing to do is to draw just a line off of the clipping plane. Right now I'm on the clipping plane layer, which is a little bit of bad practice, but it's okay. I'll make a new layer in 2D called annotation. Let's see, what's a fun color we can make this? Let's do this kind of, yeah, kind of weird yellowish green color. Cool. So we are going to change this to the annotation layer. We have the footprint of our site, so we can go ahead and just copy this object from one corner of our site to the Make 2D that we've made. I'm going to go ahead and use the command scale 1D to drag this across like so. And I want to make sure that this is centered. So, perfect. So now that this is centered, I can come in, have it like that, and maybe I'll do a little section flag coming off of it. And there's a lot of different ways you can draw a section flag. Some people like it going all the way through, like I have it in this tutorial. Some people like just little flags on the edge, but that is up to professors and your own preference to an extent. Okay, so I'm going to hatch these flags in as well. And I'm just going to use solid, if that's okay. Cool. We have those section flags. I mentioned earlier as well that we can start to show what's above in the plans, like we have in the section here. So what I'm going to do for that is we're in top view right now. I'm going to select my clipping plane in top view. I'm going to disable my clipping plane, and we can see we have these openings now. Let's turn off shadows for now. Cool. Okay. And very simple, I'm going to make another Make 2D. I'm going to select all these objects. I'm going to go Make 2D, and we're going to call this Make 2D plan above. So this is where having some sort of site or some boundary box around your 3D model becomes super important, because we can start to layer information on through various Make 2Ds. So once again, it's going to disappear on me. I'm going to do ZS for zoom selected. Now I have my Make 2D here. I'm going to go ZE to zoom extents, and we're just going to move this down towards the rest of our objects. Okay, and so I'm going to have it sit right above there. Cool. And now, what the layers of information that I'm looking for are the cuts above. So we have these, once again, everything's grouped. So I'm going to go Control-Shift-G. So I have this object here, and I also have this that I want. So Control-Shift-G. So I'm going to select these lines, I'm going to join them, and I'm going to use the move. I'm going to go from the corner of my box down to here. Cool. And now we have these objects lined up. I'm going to select these objects, and I'm going to create a new layer in 2D called above. I'm going to change the object layer. These are open to the sky above, so I am going to put an X like so, like so, and then I'm gonna, let's do a fun color here. Let's do What are we dealing with here? We don't have a green. Let's get a green going. It's kind of mint green. And since it's above, we're going to dash these lines. And you'll see it's super small dash. So another quick tidbit, we're going to go to options. You're going to get the pop-up window like this. I'm going to go to line types, and let's bump my scale up to 16. Let's see that. Perfect. Cool. I'm happy with that. And yeah, I think that is pretty much it for setting up your plans. These give you really nice bases to work from, but it's important to know that the Make 2D won't do everything for you. So you're going to have to draw in stuff on your own to really breathe life into these plans. We can, while we're here actually, go ahead and delete these objects since we don't need it. And I can delete my Make 2D layers. Like I said earlier, I was going to pull up some plans that I've been working on, some old projects, but you can start to see the amount of information that starts to get layered in to really start to sell the plan and to give life to your drawings. So creating different layers for line weights is kind of imperative, and that's going to happen everywhere. But then also different layers for entourage and context and cutting through your site context. So it's really like this drawing started as a Make 2D, and I think I have some previous versions on here. But the Make 2D doesn't give you all of the information. You have to come in and kind of draw it out. So for example, like this above cut line where my building kind of overhangs, that's a separate Make 2D I've made to get that layer of information. As well as here in this sort of atrium space, how there's a cut above the floor plan. So using or keeping in mind that the Make 2D is a tool to help aid you in making your plans, but it's only one step in the process. You still have to line weight them and add in entourage and site context to really make your drawing speak and sell your story that you're crafting. I think that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email ISAs, ask your professors, come to office hours, all that good stuff. Yeah, thanks again. Have a good one.